Welcome to Green Mountain Spinnery in Putney, Vermont. We're taking a full mill tour today, and we're gonna learn how woolen spun yarn is made. We're gonna start out in the fiber shed and make our way through the mill, and then we'll come back here and talk about all of their amazing yarns. I am with Kate. Can you tell us what you do here at Green Mountain Spinnery?
Yeah, I am sort of the shop girl, salesperson, shipping fulfiller, and tour guide of the mill.
Awesome. And you have tours here, like people can come in
Absolutely
and take a tour. So
Yep.
what do they need to do?
We request that people reach out to us first, either through the website. You can find our phone number or my email address. It's easiest for us to accommodate groups that are less than 8 people. As you guys will see in a minute, once we get onto the production floor, it's a pretty tight fit.
Yeah.
And so a small group is easier to accommodate. And it's easiest for us to have the staffing we need during the week, Monday through Friday, and between like 11 and 2. But if you can let us know when you're coming, we can try to make it possible.
Awesome. Which is what we're here doing today.
Yeah.
So you can see it here. And then maybe if you're in Vermont, you can come. That would be really fun. So what are we going to start with?
So I like to start tours here in the fiber shed so that people can see all the beautiful raw material that's waiting to become a skein.
It's amazing.
And in many cases, it's often the quietest space in the building. So when people have a lot of questions about how our process works, it's easier to talk about it out here instead of right next to the really loud machines.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So generally speaking, our machines require at least 50% wool. And so all of the yarns that we make here have quite a lot of wool content in them. About 70% of the yarns that we make are custom processing yarns. So that means that it's a service we provide other people. So we are spinning yarn for farmers, dyers, weavers, yarn stores all across the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
We're one of the only organic mills in the US. And so people send us organic fiber from as far away as Northern California to have yarn made. We've got people sending us whatever kind of fiber that they are growing.
Yeah.
So we spin wool with cotton, with mohair from Angora goats, with cotton grown in Texas. I already said that. Alpaca grown primarily here in New England.
Oh, cool.
And tencel, which is a wood pulp product similar to rayon.
Interesting.
But there are also folks that are raising Angora rabbits. We've spun with yak, with bison, and once, in our opinion, rather unsuccessfully, with husky.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, someone was a competitor in the Iditarod, and she wanted a sweater made from her team.
That's pretty cool, though.
But the fiber didn't make its way through our machinery as best as we hoped, and so we don't spin with dogs.
Don't send your dog.
Yes, yeah. So we have fiber from all over the place. Typically, when it arrives here, it is in its raw form like this. So you can feel, it's really soft. It also has quite a lot of lanolin in it. Typically, the finer the wool, the more lanolin it has. So merino, for example, has quite a lot of lanolin in it. And lanolin is a material that the sheep extrudes. It essentially waterproofs them, but it also has some antibacterial properties. So it helps heal against cuts. It's great for them. It's a real problem for our machines. So that tackiness that you may be feeling on your hands, we can't allow that to get into the machinery. So the fiber needs to be scoured before it gets into our machine. So that
here, I'll hold this one.
It ends up being transformed into something a little bit softer and with absolutely less lanolin in it.
Definitely. That's so cool.
For the most part, we are getting small amounts of wool. Our minimums are just 35 pounds of fiber for a custom batch. And that translates to somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 sheep.
Okay.
So that means that people with very small flocks have a space like us, that they can get a finished product made from their fiber, allowing them to get a return on the investment that they've made in these animals and recoup the cost of raising them much faster than if they had to reserve their wool for years and years to reach the minimums required by larger mills. But it also means that we're at such a scale that we can't spin a single fleece. We're a little bit too big for that.
So how many skeins of yarn would come from, I don't know, one sheep, or even like the smaller range, the 5 to 7?
Yeah. So if you've got a fleece that's about 5 pounds, well, let's make it even numbers actually. So no, I can still do this, I think. My math teacher of 3rd grade would be horrified. But so we've got a 5-pound fleece. We estimate a loss of about 20% of the weight during scouring. So let's just call that 4 pounds-ish. If you imagine that the finished skein is a 2-ounce skein, so that means that there'd be 8 skeins for every pound. We'd end up with 32 skeins. Wow. Yeah.
That's amazing. I know, because we're getting ready to go to Rhinebeck and things, and people will buy these fleeces, and I'm like, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, it's also going to depend on the yarn you choose to make with it. So the finer the yarn, the larger the yardage for that same 2-ounce skein. And so if you're making a bulky yarn, you're going to have less of it from that one fleece than if you were making a fine fingering or lace weight yarn.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, we get to head into the floor, right? And
yeah. So we can go take a look at our scouring department,
yes,
so you can see how we remove the lanolin from the wool that arrives here. But I do want to clarify that that handful of clean wool that we grabbed is actually from a scouring facility.
Oh.
There are a few producers that we're working with that send us such large amounts of wool, somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 to 500 pounds,
Wow,
that it's actually more efficient and time effective for them, and cost effective really, to have their fiber scoured elsewhere at a much larger facility. Because you'll see our scouring department is very small. This raw wool, it has quite a lot of lanolin in it.
yes,
You can feel that with your hands.
you can, yes.
Into something closer to this,
Okay.
which has been cleaned and dried.
Wow.
So this, with all that beautiful vegetable matter, is going to get cleaned of the dirt and the lanolin and turn into something closer to this.
Which is much floofier.
Yeah, much floofier.
Wow.
So
how does that happen?
Yeah,
This is called scouring, you said?
Yes. So the fleeces are often sorted and picked at a table outside.
Okay.
That gives us a chance to pull some of the really filthy bits
Yes.
out of the fleeces, and some of the larger pieces of vegetable matter will get pulled out. And then it goes into a sink in the back with really, really hot water. It's about 170 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
So shockingly hot. At that point, we need to be really careful, because we need to make sure the wool doesn't get felted by being agitated while it's hot and wet.
Yes.
So the fiber gets pulled into little rinse baths, and in between each bath, it gets squeezed in between these rollers that are compressed using the air brake system from trucks.
Interesting.
So the fiber gets squeezed and rinsed.
Oh, here comes one right now.
Here it comes. And it'll come out here, and you can feel it's warm and it's much, much cleaner.
Oh, yes.
Still has quite a lot of vegetable matter in it. So we can't clear all of that out of there without spending an enormous amount of time, which will add to the cost of the yarn. So from here, the fiber is going to go into this machine in the corner.
Okay.
That's the oldest machine that we have here at the mill. It was manufactured in the late 1890s. It is a cast iron washing machine that we rescued out of the basement of a hotel in Bellows Falls, where it was washing linens for decades.
No way.
This allows us to rinse the fiber one last time and then spin it out.
Okay.
And that centrifugal force pulls enough water out of the fiber that, believe it or not, it can go into this industrial dryer in the corner, and we don't have to worry about felting.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And it still has the little quarters thing on it. That's so cool.
We don't need to put in quarters, but we do end up with beautifully clean fiber.
Wow.
That is still, it's felted a little bit, but not to the point where it's irretrievable.
Mm-hmm.
So it is dense enough that it's not yet ready to go into the carding machine. So from here, it's going to go into our picker. So we'll take a look at that next.
That's so cool.
So next up is our picker.
Wow.
So all those great big metal teeth that currently look like a Muppet of some kind comb through the fiber, and they're going to tease open those larger clumps. But they also help us with the blending process.
Okay.
So this is a great illustration of how we create most of the colored yarns that we create for GMS.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do any dyeing here at this facility.
Okay.
So we use bale dyed wool. We have fiber sent to a dye house, and they clean, scour, and dye it for us.
Interesting.
We've got a palette of 13 shades that we can combine with one another in different ratios, with undyed fiber to either brighten it up or tone it down.
Interesting.
And so here you can see some of the colors that are all
like they're very saturated, more like primary colors.
Yeah, like really obnoxious kind of colors.
Oh my gosh.
But these all get blended to become amethyst, sylvan spirit. And I'll show you that color once we get to the end of the carding machine.
That is so wild.
So each color has a recipe. It's all based on a ratio of weight. And so we figure out sort of the finished weight that we're looking for. We will weigh out the different ingredients. We can layer them here on the floor like a lasagna, feed them through this machine. The fiber gets blended. So here you can already see it's already been sort of combined.
Oh, this is what it's going to look like?
This is what it's going to look like.
Oh, wow.
So this is actually from the other end of the carding machine. As long as it hasn't been spun, it can be used as raw material and go back through the system again.
Interesting.
Yeah. So here we can see some of that tencel. That's that bright, shiny white. And then we've got undyed wool and then these really bright, weird, obnoxious looking colors of wool. So the fiber goes through the machine. It gets sort of combed through and picked and blended together by all those teeth. The fiber goes through a tube in the wall here and into a storage closet.
Oh.
Ooh, here we've got rose quartz.
Oh my God. This looks like a cloud. It's like all the red and the white and everything.
Yeah, so
but
here
it comes
we
together
can
to
see,
pink, right?
Yep, here we can see some of the raw colors. So let's see, we've got tencel, undyed white wool, and then a red and a pink and a little bit of purple, and it's going to end up becoming
one of my favorite colors.
Rose quartz. Yeah.
But look at here, Ken, it's so cool.
So the fiber goes through this system. The guys who run the carding machine will check its texture and consistency, and they will grab great big armloads of this, bring it right back down, and typically run it through the system 2 or 3 times until they're satisfied. Once they think it's ready to go into the carding machine, on its last trip through the system, the fiber will get sprayed with a light coating of an organic canola oil blend. And that, plus boosting the humidity in the back part of this building, is going to dampen the static electricity in the fiber and allow it to get through the carding machine where it's headed next.
Is that here?
That's here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So here we can look in the hopper. And so we've got this fiber that's all ready to go. So we've got the blended fiber here, but we can also see some pieces of pencil roving and some carded fleece.
Oh, yes.
So those show you what the colors are going to become once they all get blended together. They also show you the material that we gather from 2 separate sections of the machine. So first, the carded fleece is really just sort of stuff that flies up into the air and it gets caught by these vacuum tubes and delivered right back here to be reused.
That's
and then
so cool.
Pencil roving is the finished product of this machine. And so we'll go see how this machine creates that.
So why did it end up back in here?
So it takes about 2 pounds of material to get from one end of the machine to the end. That's where we can take a weight sample and make sure that the machine is calibrated correctly for what we're trying to create, our finished product. And often we can cut that material off and then reuse it.
Wow, that's amazing.
So our carding machine is a woolen carding machine.
Okay.
So we can talk a little bit about the difference between the woolen carding process and the worsted carding process.
Yes, because I've heard these terms before and I'm like, I sort of visually sort of know, but I really don't understand what makes something woolen spun versus worsted spun.
Yeah. So let's walk along the machine and we can talk about it.
Okay, great. Here, actually, you should go first. I'll follow you.
So our carding machine is covered. All these rolls are covered in a fabric tape that have metal barbs embedded in it. As we walk down the machine, you'll see that the spikes change in length and texture and consistency. They are all working together to comb the fiber out.
Mm-hmm.
So the fiber is getting pulled in between these rollers. Those rollers have about a 16th inch clearance, and that's where the fiber is moving past all of these.
Mm.
The smallest rollers on this machine dictate that we've got a very limited fiber length that can go through this machine.
Okay.
This machine was designed originally to comb medium coarse wool of a medium length, about 2.5 to 5.5 inches in length.
Okay.
And if we try to put anything longer than that fiber, it'll felt in place on those small rollers instead of moving through the machine.
Interesting.
For that reason, we need to combine at least 50% wool with all of the yarns that we make here. For example, if someone were raising just alpaca fiber, we can't make a 100% alpaca yarn because the fiber will either drop on the floor or get stuck in place. But by cheating the machine, by adding wool into the fiber mix, we can often sort of coax it through the machine.
Interesting. So how old is this machine?
Well, it's actually combined. It's a bit of a Frankenstein.
Okay.
The first part, the hopper here, was manufactured in 1951. But these larger wheels, we've got 2 of them. Both of them are over 100 years old.
That is so cool.
Yeah, we keep it running with a combination of belts from that are currently being manufactured for elevators. There's gears and chains from tractors and motorcycles. Plus a whole bunch of other little parts that we actually have to machine here.
Wow.
But I got a little distracted. Sorry.
No, this
telling
is so
you the story of the woolen spun carding process. The key part happens right here.
Okay.
So the fiber is folded up and brought up and over by this conveyor belt to the second half of the machine. And the fiber that's all been going in one direction gets folded sideways by this roller. And you should pat this because it is soft as a dream.
Oh my gosh. Oh, it's so nice.
Right? It's like petting a unicorn or something.
Yeah. It's like cotton candy with this color.
Yeah, totally. So this 90-degree change of direction that the fiber is getting right in the middle of the carding process is what creates the woolen spun structure of all of our yarns. So what's happening is that 90-degree change of direction that the fiber experience is trapping those short and medium length fibers required by the machine into a really random, chaotic web-like structure. That means that there are short endy bits all along the length of it, which makes it look a little bit more rustic. And for some people may trigger that prickle factor. But it also means that there's quite a lot of air stuck inside that structure. So that air provides us with a bunch of different benefits. It acts like a down jacket. So a sweater quantity of woolen spun yarn feels lighter weight on your body because you're actually warming the air inside the yarn, not just the yarn itself.
Interesting.
But it also provides just a tiny bit of space. And that can accommodate the difference in tensioning that we have as knitters between the row that we knit after a cup of coffee and bad news in the morning and a glass of wine and a good conversation with a dear friend at night. So once we block our garment, the air inside the yarn can even things out and make the garment look more finished.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
That's the best explanation I've ever heard because now I understand.
So the
That's
worsted
amazing.
spinning process is created with different machines that we don't have here.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps the fibers aligned all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of the crisscross, you end up with a really strong, long cable-like structure. Worsted spun yarns are typically stronger, they're denser, there's more material inside them, so they're heavier, and they're often shinier because they've got a longer reflective surface.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So the sweater that I'm wearing, the process smock, combines woolen spun yarn and worsted spun yarn. So the main color, that beautiful soft gray that looks more rustic, is our yarns.
Mm-hmm.
But the gold is from Magpie Fibers, and that's a worsted spun yarn that really shines and looks really different in texture.
It does. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So this will go through again.
Yep. So it gets folded sideways and then it continues along in the same direction that it started, combed out a little bit further.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to pause here and let me see if I can not get grease all over me. That last network that comes off of that roller is so transparent, you can see right through it.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. It's so fragile, it ends up getting cut apart by these leather belts and this notch here. And so it gets cut into strands that are about a 1/2 inch wide. Those are then fed by the same rubber belts leather belts. It gets fed by the leather belts in between rubber aprons that jostle against one another. And that little bit of friction is enough to twist that 1/2 inch strand into the pencil roving that's the finished product of this machine.
It's so fine too.
Yeah. So it looks like yarn, but it's about as strong as dryer lint.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we need to spin this in order to give it some strength. So great big rolls of this beautiful pencil roving are brought around the corner to our spinning frame. And we'll go take a look at that.
Ooh, and now I see the pretty purple color.
Yeah, so this is our amethyst that we were looking at earlier.
That is beautiful.
So here are some examples of
yes.
the rolls of roving. And
like big spools of yarn.
Yeah, and it sort of feels a little bit like a marshmallow. It's really soft.
Oh, and they're like in the little cake.
Yeah.
You know, this reminds me of like Lopi.
Pluto Lopi, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So these will
see
get
it?
mounted up on top of the machine, and then
Oh,
they
I
get
see.
hand threaded through this mechanism. As you'll see, once the machine gets running, quite a lot of vegetable matter ends up getting literally spun out of the fiber as it gets worked. So this part spins it. It ends up winding itself around bobbins that are mounted on the bottom arm of this machine. And now let's see if we can grab.
Yeah.
You can see it's a lot stronger.
And this
than
is
the
just
pencil roving.
one ply
And
of
this is a single ply. So this machine creates single plies for us. We can create a range of ply sizes by potentially combining multiple strands of roving to be spun together by this machine. So we could do a single strand, which would create something as thin as lace, but we could combine as many as 6 of these guys to create a bulky single ply.
Interesting. Wow.
Once these bobbins get filled up, they're brought around the corner.
Okay.
And we put them in a steam box. We pile them into a cart like this one. So we've got, we've got perfect examples. So here is a single ply. So this is, remember the green mountain green that we felt in the barn? So I told you that was a 2-ply version of the Simply Fine. This is that single ply Simply Fine in the same natural dark color.
Wow.
So we're going to be making more of that.
Very cool.
So this will go straight to skeinin because the finished yarn is actually a single ply. But here, we've got some of our 2-ply Alpaca Elegance that we saw. This is a new batch of that dark roast color we were looking at.
So pretty.
So single plies of this yarn are after they've been steamed for 2 hours, and that steaming helps set the twist.
Okay.
That gets put on our plying frame. They're then spun in the opposite direction around fresh bobbins that would need to be steamed again for another 2 hours to set that twist.
Wow. So is each one of these bobbins a skein of yarn?
Much more.
More. Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. So We then put bobbins onto either our coning machine here or our skeiner. That allows us to wind off as many as a dozen identical skeins at the same time.
Wow.
When we're working with yarns that we'll sell here to our direct customers, we wash the skeins one more time. So that allows us to get them into a washing machine in the back with hot water and a little bit of woolen. That's going to remove that coating of spinning oil that we added to the fiber in the picker that allowed it to get through all these machines without getting jammed up. And also give the yarn a chance to bloom a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the benefits of woolen spinning is that the yarns, particularly if they're not restricted by a ply, will want to behave like a marshmallow. So they will just puff right up. And by washing them, we guarantee that the size of the yarn more closely matches its true gauge than it would look like if it still had the spinning oil on it.
Interesting. Are those clean, like ones that are washing in?
Yep. So these have been washed and now they're up here air drying. And once they dry, we'll twist them up and label them and they'll be ready for sale.
We're going to talk about some of your yarn bases. So the one I'm holding here, they're all the same. They're all natural colors. And this is an alpaca.
It's a woolen alpaca blend.
Okay.
Yep.
Tell me more about this one.
So we are able to source alpaca from farms all around New England, and people are raising animals of all different shades, which are a real gift. And so this yarn is a 50-50 blend of wool and alpaca, and the color of each of those skeins is coming from the alpaca fiber itself.
Interesting.
And it'll be combined either with a white wool or a dark wool. So this is going to be a combination of a dark alpaca combined with a dark wool to create that beautiful, rich, dark Oreo chocolate color.
It is good. It's called dark roast. I'm sensing because this one's called Earl Grey. This one is cream.
We've got
chai. Oh my gosh.
And cocoa and cappuccino.
I love that. These would be so beautiful to use all together too.
Yeah. So here we actually have a range of different wool and mohair blends. So we source mohair that is fiber that comes from Angora goats, which is kind of confusing because Angora fiber comes from rabbits.
Right. That is confusing. I'm glad you clarified that.
And this is all fiber from different aged animals.
Oh.
So the animals, just like us, their fiber or their hair coarsens as they grow older. So the younger the animal, the softer the fiber. So our Green Mountain Green is a 2-ply version of our Simply Fine yarn. It's the same yarn, our same fiber combination of very fine wool. It's the softest wool we work with, and the youngest kid mohair that we're able to get. So that is from animals that have been less than a year old. That's their first shearing that they ever have. And then next up is our Mountain Mohair, which is sort of a workhorse yarn of ours. We just love it. The fiber for this yarn comes from yearling Angora goats. And so those are animals that are about a year old. And then our Capricorn comes from more mature animals. And so this is fiber from goats that are 2 to 3 years old.
Okay.
But all three, in my opinion, are very, very soft.
I was going to say, I almost feel like this is one of the softest ones. Like they're all great.
The fuzziest.
Definitely. That's so cool. And all, again, this is all natural.
All undyed.
All undyed. Now I picked up all 3 of these. I know they're all different.
They are. So these are 3 of our DK weight yarns.
Nice.
So we've got 100% wool here. So this is one of our organic, New Mexico organic skeins. So this is from a shearing, a flock that was raised by the Manzanares family, and they raise their animals organically. A lot of people come in and they ask us, what does that mean?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. So that typically means that they are going to the cost and additional trouble of taking incredible care of their animals. They're providing them with organic feed when supplemental feed is necessary. It also means that they are going to great lengths not to treat them with chemicals in a way that's going to, you know, sort of benefit their health or inoculate them against diseases, that there are natural ways that they can be protected against those things that wouldn't impact their fiber. So the fiber, once it's sheared, is certified organic. We are sort of a special mill here in the US because the state of Vermont has come up with a certification program for us. And so we can guarantee that organic fiber is turned into organic yarn by maintaining the organic status of that fiber all the way through our production process.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a really special.
And part of that means that it doesn't get dyed.
Oh, it's really nice. Gosh, that's so cool. Now, what about this one?
So this is a Cotton Comfort. So this is a blend where we blend 80% wool and 20% cotton. And what's unusual about this particular color, Winter Beach, is that the beautiful sort of cinnamon or nutmeg color that you see there is actually coming from the cotton itself.
Oh.
So there's special cotton that is grown that naturally comes in this sort of cinnamon color. And so that color is coming through the skein.
Wow. That's something new for me to learn. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And we got one more.
Last but not least here is our Sylvan Spirit. So this is a DK weight single ply blend of wool and tencel. Tencel is a wood pulp product similar to rayon, but it's made in a closed loop system, so there are fewer pollutants from its creation. And for us, it provides a bunch of different benefits in the finished yarn because it is a super duper bright, shiny white material.
Yeah.
So it adds a really beautiful luster to the yarn that improves the stitch definition. And because it's a plant material, it behaves like a lot of other plant materials do in yarn. And so like bamboo and like cotton, it could provide a really beautiful swingy drape if you knit it at a looser gauge to give it the space for that movement.
Interesting. That's super cool. Well, you know, I have to ask you now, what is your favorite? What is your favorite base like to work with?
I really love the mohair.
Yeah.
I am pretty much exclusively a sweater knitter. And so I really like to create garments that are going to last for a long time and look as pristine as possible, even though I wear them almost every day.
Yes.
And so I like the protection that mohair can provide in knitted fabric. Generally speaking, when you have mohair either blended in by adding a strand of that, as many designers have called for in the past couple of years, or if you're using a yarn like ours, where it's combined in with the yarn, the mohair, and I can show you this if you don't mind, that beautiful fuzz that you were noticing that registers as softness for us is the halo. And that's what Angora mohair provides for us. That halo actually creates a physical buffer that protects the stitches themselves against the friction that causes pilling.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah. And so it adds a little bit of extra warmth, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what climate you're living in. Right. For me, living in Vermont, it's a good thing.
It is.
But more importantly, that beautiful halo is going to keep the sweater looking new for much, much longer.
Wow. I am here with David. Can you tell us what you do here?
Well, what I do here, a lot of what I do here right now is training for someone who can take a lot of my job as I retire.
Oh.
So that is a lot of what I'm doing.
Are you hands-on, like in the mill, making the yarns?
And the fiber, a lot about, because my main job has been about bringing in the fiber.
Oh, are you working with farms to bring in the fibers?
Yeah.
So, okay, I want to get back to the yarn thing in just a second. There's just so much I want to ask you. Can we talk about maybe just the history of Green Mountain Spinnery? When did it get started, and were Were you part of that beginning?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about it.
It was a group of people who were trying to discuss what we could do as members of this community that might be beneficial to the community. 2 of the members and 2 of our founders were lifetime knitters and weavers. So this group continued to meet for 2 years, and it was Claire Wilson, one of our founders, who said, how come we see all those sheep in the hills and the yarn that I'm knitting with is European or from somewhere far away? It seemed like a logical question, but of course, what was the answer to that?
Mm-hmm.
So that remained a kind of a discussion point. And eventually, Claire, with her good friend Libby Mills, who was a dean at the Putney School and had started the weaving program there, found themselves in an affinity group protesting the nuclear power plant in Seabrook, and were put in jail together.
Oh.
So they saw it as an opportunity. Why did this happen? And they just started talking about something they wanted to do, which was different than just protesting something that they felt wasn't great for the environment.
Mm-hmm.
What could be done? And this little seed started growing sprouts.
What year was that?
70s, late 70s.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're 43. Our company's 43 years old. We opened in 81.
Have you always been here in this space? Or?
Yes, this was a filling station that had closed because of the, quote, oil crisis at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it came up for sale. Claire decided to, what the heck, bid on it. And to everybody's surprise, her bid was accepted.
Amazing.
So now we had a building and we had this idea. And it was a crazy idea. You had to be crazy to think that this might be a possibility. And I came from education and human services. I just felt like this group was solid and wanted something really significant.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be part of it. He just showed up and he said, would you still like some help? Well, we were at a loss. We had these machines that you'll see, and we had people trying to run them, but we're pretty much overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew exactly what to do. So he became our card man for, 20 years or something before he died.
I'm curious about where, you said you were wanting to resolve sort of this where you're getting wool from all of these other countries and how to bring it in locally. So where are you now as far as where your wool comes from?
Right. Well, where we are is that it's all domestic.
Yeah.
It started with just here. I went out to the fields and met people, and mostly their wool was going to, at that time, and they still exist, wool pools.
Mm-hmm.
This was my beginning of my career, my next career.
So yeah, were you there when all of this was happening, when they were finding the space for the mill and everything?
Yeah.
And you were part of all that. Wow.
Yeah. And we also had a statement of purpose that we had to put with it because we kind of came in as environmentalists and social activists.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to create a company that had that kind of basis.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know anything about the wool, except that it itched when I was little.
Right.
But I was the one. It made sense that I should be going out to the farms and meeting these people, which I knew how to meet people. So just began talking with them and then just tried out. We got wool from them, and often it was full of sticks and chaff.
Mm-hmm.
But we also figured out how to kind of work on it, sorting. And I took 2 courses in wool classing eventually. And most people said to us at that time that the wool here is kind of useless, not good for knitting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had the knitters and weavers right here. We worked at it, we made the yarn, and they loved it.
Yeah.
So we were already disproving a theory about New England. We weren't making yarns for ourselves very long before we realized we had to have patterns. And Libby and Claire went to work immediately to eliminate that problem because they themselves knew of people in the community who were wearing beautiful hand-knit garments from some pattern somewhere, or sometimes there wasn't even a pattern, but they figured out that they could make a pattern from these other ideas that existed right in this community. So you can see how we're taking what's outside, but we're also trying to bring it here.
Now you mentioned burlap, that was part of your early history.
Absolutely.
And
we never got any wool. When we got wool from the farms, it was in the big burlap bags.
Oh, wow. That's really
They're
cool.
7 feet long, generally.
How much would something like this weigh? Like, wool's not like super heavy, but when you get a lot of it.
Well, the bag itself weighs 3 pounds.
Yeah. It's heavy.
and then the farmers at that time would compete to see how much they could get in one bag.
Really?
And it would be 200 or 200 and something, which is pretty common, 200 pounds.
Oh my gosh. So do you have a favorite type of yarn?
Oh boy. I have reasons to love all of them. When you say that, I think of what the Navajos prefer, for example. Or I think of what I made from the wool that was on the sheep that were grazing against buckthorn up on Putney Mountain. So that was a three-ply worsted. And I knew that I wanted something that was strong and would hold up, because it was a Dorset-based, East Frisian-based yarn. So I wanted it to be twisted, so I wanted it to be strong. But I mean, yesterday we were talking to someone who had fine wool into making our most luscious yarn. That's sort of, I don't know how to answer that question.
There's too many to love.
I know an answer I might give, which is that I really care about what happened to the fiber that was grown. Where did it come from, and what were the animals and the sheep and the fields? What was happening there? Because we now know that grazing really helps the soil and returns carbon to the soil, and those practices are what can bring soil back. So I'm always interested in hearing from them about where it comes from. Oh yeah, this is an example.
Yeah.
This is kind of Corriedale wool grown in Massachusetts. It's a beautiful farm, and she cares for the environment, and the whole thing is a great combination.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for talking with us today. This has been so cool.